Our story takes place in the city of Ebelstein, a place with a very medieval look. There lives an elderly man known to everyone as the Proud Old Man. Despite his name, he could only use one star magic and lived in the poor districts. The old man claimed to be an archmage, but was always irritated, and would even argue with children who were playing around. At that moment, a boy with white hair and red eyes was watching the grumpy old man. This young man then reveals that he learned to use magic from that old man. Apparently, there was no big reason for the boy to have become his apprentice. The old man just needed a follower to stroke his ego. Meanwhile, the young man needed knowledge to become stronger. The seasons then passed, and the boy's training continued without stopping. One day, the master watched his student practice. With a blue aura around him, the white-haired boy concentrated and released a large amount of mana. Surprised by this, the old man wondered if the boy had already understood the flow of mana. With his red eyes shining brightly, the protagonist showed an absurd amount of talent. He then extended his hand and created a powerful blue light with his energy. Right after, the boy cast a spell that took the form of a sword of light. The attack flew quickly and hit a wooden wall head-on. After the powerful spell, the young man was exhausted while his master watched him. The old man was shocked by what he saw and broke into a cold sweat. Even while doing chores for the old man, our protagonist remained determined to learn. Even with his talent, the young man became a one-star mage in just 1 year of training. But the old man said that was nothing, as nobles reach 3 stars before coming of age. He said that a commoner like the boy would never reach that level and would give up at 2 stars. The master always said that bloodline was everything and that the boy's effort was useless. At this, the protagonist wondered if the old man said that out of envy for things he couldn't achieve. That night, the boy stayed by his master's side near the campfire for a long time. The next day, a heavy rain began to fall nonstop over the city, and when the young man returned home, he found his master lifeless on the floor. The old man's body was covered in bruises, so he had clearly been attacked. Initially, he thought the old man had gotten into a fight somewhere and ended up on the losing end. But later, the boy discovered that his master had actually been attacked by the guards. With that, the young man buried the old man's body in a shallow grave with a wooden cross. Apparently, the master was caught trying to take a 2-star magic book from the warehouse. He didn't understand why the old man would do that. And at that moment, a blue screen appeared. That old man who talked so much about noble bloodlines ended up doing something unthinkable. The system said he had mastered the basics and could now choose his primary school of magic. 4 years passed, and the boy revealed that he wasn't actually from that world. During that time, he met a very skilled woman named Katia Flameheart. She was from a bankrupt noble family and a 3-star mage wanted by mercenaries. So she started working for a company and taught the young boy magic. Our protagonist learned many things from Katia, who was a 3-star mage. One day, they were talking in a tavern called Beldern's Tears. The woman said it's natural for a mage to have ambitions and that the young man named Derek has talent. But she warned him that excessive greed would only delay his achievements in the future. The white-haired protagonist agreed with his master and said he would remember that. Then the mage asked her student to close his eyes and concentrate to feel the mana. She instructed him to feel the origin and flow of the energy and to manifest whatever he imagined. With that, the boy obeyed his teacher and released a powerful blue aura from his body. The master realized he had an absurd amount of mana and very stable control. At that moment, the boy's eyes glowed a shade of purple as the energy flowed. The woman was impressed by the amount of power he was releasing at once. Suddenly, a large explosion occurred outside the tavern, startling everyone. The people inside panicked and wondered what was happening. The boy was also startled by the commotion and looked at his hands, not understanding anything. Seeing this, his master quickly grabbed his hand to try to calm him down. She then told the young man not to say anything and to just follow her out of the place. Outside, some guards were gathering because they heard the loud explosion coming from there. The mage then led her student through an alley to avoid meeting the city soldiers. The young man continued to follow the woman, not understanding what had just happened. At that moment, She stopped and told the boy to listen carefully to what she was about to say. The boy agreed and waited attentively for his master's words. The woman explained that nobles are sensitive about their privileges, and magic is the greatest of them all. She continued, saying that innate power is a blessing only for the nobility, and the few commoners who reach that level dedicate their entire lives to it. With that, the mage revealed that he had used a two-star illusion spell called auditory hallucination. So at 14 years old, he became a two-star mage, and the system confirmed his new skill. After that, Katja continued to teach him various spells and tell him about high society. A year passed, and the woman had to leave, leaving the young man behind. Apparently, Count Elvister's family had appointed her as a private tutor. This was an offer that the mage simply could not refuse. Being a magic teacher for a noble family of that caliber was a blessing for anyone. As a farewell gift, she left a two-star magic book for the boy. The protagonist then took the book his master gave him and began to study on his own. A year later, he learned two more two-star spells on his own. With a determined look, the young man showed that he wasn't going to stop there. At 16 years old, he had no intention of stopping, and a man called out to him in the tavern. The man asked the boy what kind of job he was looking for. He then revealed that it was a request from the family of Grand Duke Duplain. The young man was surprised and wondered why such an important family would seek them out. But the man said the important thing is that the Duplain family spends gold like it's water. He said that if they could get a connection with them, they would have more opportunities in the future. The young man then asked what they wanted the company to do. The man replied that they just needed to hunt some monsters on the outskirts of the Grand Duchy. Our protagonist found that very suspicious and became thoughtful about the job. With that, he refused to do the job, and the man shouted for him to wait. The white-haired boy said he doesn't do suspicious jobs and to call someone else. But the guild master complained that they needed a mage and that they are rare nowadays. The young man still wondered why they would need a mage to hunt a few monsters. The white-haired boy then turned around, annoyed by his boss's insistence. To convince him, the man offered a gold coin as an initial payment. Upon seeing the money, the young man seemed to reconsider his boss's proposal. At that moment, a gentleman with a monocle and a mustache appeared on the scene. With him were two women, an older one and a hooded one. The guild master then introduced the boy to his new clients, but the old man said that a child who hasn't even had his coming-of-age ceremony is no good. The boss tried to defend the young man, saying he is the most skilled mage he knows. Ignoring the man, the old man said they should leave because he wouldn't entrust the mission to a child. With that, the clients turned and started walking toward the tavern's exit. However, the hooded woman seemed to have other plans and looked back. She then approached the white-haired boy and called him over for a chat. They then departed for the Grand Duchy of Duplain to begin the mission. There, the young man began to face the goblins using his powerful magic. With his red eyes shining, he showed his determination in combat. He defeated the monsters with ease, and without showing any mercy, one of the goblins tried to attack the boy from behind with a makeshift axe. But the green creature's attack was no match for the young man's speed. With a cold look, the protagonist finished off the last monster of the horde. Afterward, he used an electric spell to take care of the monsters of bodies. With everything finished, the young man informed the official that the job was done. The old man and the woman observed the scene without showing much surprise. The hooded girl then commented that he dealt with all of them very quickly. Back at the tavern, the white-haired boy met a fellow guild member. The blonde girl accused him of having become the noble's little dog. She yelled that even though they were commoners, they shouldn't lower themselves for the nobility. The young woman then asked how much they paid him to throw away his pride. The guild master held up one finger, and the girl got angry, thinking it was 1 silver coin. But with a mischievous smile, the man revealed that she was mistaken. He then said that it was actually 1 gold coin, and the girl was shocked. With that, the young woman begged for them to let her grovel before them too. That night, the young mercenary reflected on the day's events. The girl who caused the scene was now passed out while the boss asked about the job. The white-haired young man replied that it was no big deal, and he just hunted some goblins. But the boy then revealed that the 3 clients were actually lying about everything. Surprised by the revelation, the guild master didn't understand the situation. He explained that a noble official should have youth and social skills, but the old man had neither, and the woman who claimed to be a maid had hands that were too clean for someone who does heavy labor. When he was about to talk about the inspector's apprentice, his boss interrupted him by calling his name. The young man then looked at his superior with a serious expression on his face. The man said that they are mercenaries and just need to do the job and get the money. Although suspicious, the boy agreed with his boss's words and accepted the situation. The boss finished by saying that in the wild, only survival matters and the rest is worthless. The next day, they returned to the Grand Duchy of Duplain to finish the job. The young man informed the clients that the area was clear and the goblins wouldn't be back for a while. With the job done, the guild master asked the old man about the final payment. At this, the client handed over 2 shiny gold coins as a reward for the service. The man got excited about the money and showed the 2 gold coins to the boy. Seeing that scene, the man with the monocle cleared his throat to get their attention. He said that he greatly values the young man's skills and would like to make a new request. The guild master then jumped into the conversation and asked what he wanted with his subordinate. The man revealed that the Grand Duke was offering 15 gold coins for the job, leaving everyone shocked. The man with the monocle then asked if the young man would accept the new mission. Without hesitating for a second, the white-haired boy agreed to the proposal. With that, they took a carriage and departed for the Grand Duke's residence. Soon they arrived at the Duplain family mansion, a giant and luxurious place. The guild master was impressed by the size of the noble residence. Before they entered, the old man said he needed to formally introduce himself to them. He revealed that his name is Dellin, and he is the head butler of the estate. The guild master became nervous, not knowing what to do in that situation. Next, the older woman introduced herself as Katerina, the head housekeeper. Embarrassed, Jaden introduced himself as the leader of the Beldern mercenary company. The young man thought that he had expected this, but their positions were quite high. At that moment, the hooded girl, who had been quiet, began to move. Seeing this, the guild master wondered who that last person could be. The mysterious woman then removed her hood, revealing her face to everyone. Her long, dark hair swayed in the wind as she revealed herself. The protagonist watched the blue-eyed girl with a serious expression. She introduced herself as Azilin and said she wants to appoint the boy as her sister's tutor. The young man was shocked by the proposal and wondered if he had heard correctly. Inside the Duplain residence, a young man throws the door open and enters the office. He then storms into the office and yells at his father, named Valerian. The boy rushes in, catching the attention of his father and his blonde brother. The Grand Duke then tells his son Raid to carry himself with dignity in his presence. Annoyed, the young man says that the one who needs dignity is Yahello, as he supports a maid. The young woman is crying desperately because this Yahello person went too far and harmed her. The blonde brother then tells Raid to be quiet because they were in the middle of a conversation, but the young man ignores him and says that more than 10 servants have quit in the last month. He then asks how long his father will continue to ignore that troublemaker. The blonde brother stands up, annoyed with Raig's attitude, and shouts his name. Then the light-haired man tells his brother to stop making a scene and to leave. The dark-haired boy is silent for a moment with a serious expression. He says that even if Yahello is useless, they still have Isulin for the future. Raig then states it's time to get rid of the troublesome girl, but the Grand Duke calmly takes off his glasses and says that's not his decision to make. The young man reveals that he has already found a monastery for her and that it would be better for the family. Furious at his son's words, the father forcefully grabs him by the head. In a swift move, the Grand Duke slams Raig's head onto his desk. With a threatening look, the man pins his son against the wooden desk. Even though he's hurt, the young man says that when the time comes, his father will have to decide. The Grand Duke stares at his son with a cold, threatening gaze after the altercation. Meanwhile, Isulin and our protagonist finally arrive in the main room. The girl then asks if the young mage has ever heard of her sister, Dila. With a mysterious smile, she says her sister isn't well known to the public. At that moment, the large office doors open, and they enter the room. Inside, they find Reg with an injured face and his blonde brother. The light-haired man greets Iselin and asks how her stay was. The young woman replies with a smile that she lived comfortably, thanks to his care. Then the older brother says that Reg is hurt, and that they can talk later. With his red eyes, the protagonist observes the whole situation in silence. The blonde man places a cloth on Reg's head to tend to his injury. The white-haired boy continues to analyze the strange dynamic of that family. Then he notices the maid who was with Reg, crying in a corner of the room. The young mercenary becomes thoughtful, trying to understand what is happening there. Back in the office, the Grand Duke says he is happy to know his daughter is well. Iselin thanks him and introduces the boy as Diala's new magic tutor. The family patriarch then puts on his glasses and stares at the white-haired young man. The girl says that since he's busy, they will leave the room now. But before they leave, the Grand Duke tells the new magic tutor to stay behind. The protagonist turns around, not understanding what the nobleman wants to talk to him about. In the office, the atmosphere becomes tense as the Grand Duke and the young man stare at each other. Calmly, the head of the Duplain family begins to write on a piece of parchment at his desk. He then comments that the boy is very young and asks if he is 16 years old. The white-haired protagonist confirms his age to the nobleman with a simple yes. The man asks about his skills, and the young man says he uses one-star magic. With a smirk, the Grand Duke starts to laugh at the boy's answer. He says that humility isn't always a virtue, and that he knows the young man is lying. Seeing that he's been found out, the white-haired boy just remains silent. Then the nobleman releases his aura, and the young man realizes he is a 5-star mage. The mercenary apologizes, but the Lord says he understands, as having too much talent can be a bad thing. The man comments that based on his clothes and age, the young man doesn't look like a magic tutor. Without hesitating, the white-haired boy reveals that he is actually a mercenary. The nobleman says he trusts his daughter's choice and will allow him into the annex. He dismisses him, but the young man interrupts to ask one last question. The Grand Duke then allows the boy to say what he wants to know. The young man says that his duty as a mercenary is to ensure that Lady Diala learns magic. He explains that the mission is to get the girl into high society. The man then asks why the boy is stating the obvious to him. At this, the young man reveals that he actually has a very serious request to make. The Grand Duke is intrigued by the boy's boldness and waits to hear the request. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a plate is thrown forcefully against the floor. At the noise, the maid cries out in shock and cowers in fear. The servant apologizes several times, but the girl treats her with great contempt. The young noble then tells the maid to get lost and threatens her not to show her face again. In another room, the guild master asks Iselin why she chose that boy. He says many tutors would line up for this job, and it would be difficult for a commoner. The young woman reveals that she has already tried the most famous tutors, but they all gave up. She goes on to say that the young man's master was a bankrupt noble, so he learned a lot. Because of this, the girl believed he could guide her sister Diala with kindness. The man then laughs and says that Iselin needs to learn to read people better. He reminds her that the boy grew up on the streets and didn't survive on kindness alone. The young noble is surprised by the man's words and seems to rethink her choice. At that moment, our protagonist is guided down the hallway by a butler. The white-haired young man then approaches a large wooden door in the hallway. With that, he raises his hand to knock on the bedroom door. The boy then knocks twice on the door, waiting for a response from the other side. Receiving no answer, he just stands there silently for a moment. Seeing that no one was going to answer, the young mercenary decides to open the door himself. Upon entering the room, he greets the person sitting inside. He then introduces himself as Derek to the brown-haired girl sitting at the table. The blonde-haired girl, who reveals herself to be Diala, tells the young man to approach. Obeying the order, the white-haired boy walks toward the noblewoman. At that moment, the young woman gives a mischievous smile and seems to have a plan in mind. Suddenly, she throws something in the boy's face, who can't dodge in time. As a result, the young man is completely soaked with dirty, disgusting water. The girl then starts laughing and says she thought a sewer rat had come in. She humiliates him, saying that on second thought, he really does look like a sewer rat. The young noble then grabs a nearby chair to use for support. With it, she climbs onto a small table to be taller than the boy. Then the blonde dumps a bucket of dirty water on the new magic tutor's head. The mercenary just stands there in silence as the water runs down his face. The girl complains that she's out of water and regrets not being able to humiliate him more. But the young man lifts his head and stares at her with a cold, frightening gaze. Seeing that expression, the girl is shocked and speechless for a moment. Annoyed, she tries to kick him, but the boy grabs her leg tightly. The young man then kneels in front of the noblewoman, still holding her foot firmly. The girl gets angry for being touched and insults the white-haired mercenary. She then covers her nose and complains that he stinks because of the dirty water. Despite being humiliated, the young man continues to stare at the noblewoman without showing any emotion. The girl then leans on the table and seems to prepare to continue the humiliation. The noblewoman continues the humiliation and tells the sewer rat to know his place. We then return to the young man's conversation with the Grand Duke in his office. The head of the Duplain family was looking out the window while thinking about the situation. With a serious expression, the older man listened to the mercenary's words. The boy says that Diala's problem is not a simple one and makes a request to the Lord. With his red eyes, he asks how much authority the nobleman will grant him. The Grand Duke then stares at the white-haired young man, analyzing his bold request. Back in the present, the blonde girl's face is red, and she's in shock. Apparently, the young man lost his patience and gave the spoiled noblewoman a firm tap. He then looks down on her with a cold expression and no regrets. Shocked, the girl puts a hand to her face, unable to believe what just happened. With his red eyes glowing, the mercenary tells the young woman to get up. At that moment, he remembers a conversation from 3 years ago with his master. Back then, he had asked Katia what to do with a very stubborn student. The mage replied that she would try to understand and embrace that type of student, but the boy finds the answer too idealistic and asks about the worst cases. The master explains that if communication fails, a different starting point is needed. With a serious look, she reveals that the method is to simply use fear to your advantage. Back in the room, Yahello is still on the floor, completely frightened by his actions. The young man then tells her to treat others with respect and to get up now. The spoiled noble then pushes herself up from the floor to try and stand after the lesson. Full of anger, she throws herself at the young mercenary, trying to fight back. The girl yells that a commoner like him has no right to touch a noblewoman, but the boy loses his patience completely and gives the young woman another tap to quiet her down. He then says he won't have to repeat himself twice for her either. With a scary smile, the noblewoman seems not to understand what he is saying, so she yells for the butler and accuses the young man of harming a lady of the nobility. At this, the head butler and the maids come running and ask if she is okay. The old man scolds the boy and says the Grand Duke will find out what he did. But unfazed, the white-haired young man just takes out a parchment he was keeping. He reveals that the Grand Duke gave him full authority over the girl's education. The butler takes the document and is shocked to see the family's official seal on the paper. The young noblewoman is also surprised and doesn't understand what is happening. That night, the Duplain mansion seemed calm, but the commotion wasn't over yet. The blonde brother, Valerian, runs through the halls with Reg, who is trying to calm him down. He then bursts into one of the rooms, yelling and calling for the mercenary he hired. Inside, the white-haired young man was calmly reading a book in bed. Valerian yells, asking how he dares to lay a hand on Diala, but Reg holds him back forcefully. Calmly, the tutor replies that it was something permitted by the Grand Duke himself. Reg then tells his brother that their father allowed it, and that he is a guest of Aislin's. Valerian then tells the young man to come with him, and tells Reg to stay out of it. The dark-haired brother says that Diala needed a lesson, and that Valerian won't overdo it. At this, the protagonist watches the two brothers with a serious expression on his face. Reg wonders why his blonde brother protects that hopeless girl so much. In a dark room, a few old dolls are sitting on the floor near the door. Valerian then invites the young man to enter his sister Diala's old room. He explains that this was her room in the main house, and it has been untouched ever since. The white-haired protagonist observes an unfinished painting on an easel. The nobleman reveals that his sister loved to draw and looked adorable showing off her work, but he says that she never finished a drawing and always left a blank space. Valerian apologizes for getting worked up earlier, and the young man tells him not to worry. The mercenary then asks why he brought him to that room full of paintings. The blonde-haired man wanted to show that Diala didn't deserve to be looked down on like that. He says she became obsessed with her bloodline and ended up being sent to the annex. Now Valerian wants to prevent them from sending her to a monastery and picks up some books. With that, the older brother begs the young man to save his sister Diala, but the protagonist notices something in the books and asks the nobleman to wait a moment. He says that based on the notes in the margins, the girl hasn't completely given up on magic. The young man asks if those are books from the School of Regulations, and Valerian confirms. The mercenary becomes thoughtful with the new discovery and seems to have a plan in mind. The young mercenary then observes one of the landscape paintings in the girl's room. With that, he picks up one of the theory books that were there and seems to make a decision. Then he says he's going to try his new plan and hands the book to the noblewoman's brother. That same night, the annex of the grand mansion was completely silent and dark. In her room, the young Diala was sleeping peacefully in her bed without noticing anything unusual, but suddenly, a bucket of very cold water is thrown forcefully to wake her up. The girl then wakes up screaming desperately with the ice-cold water all over her face. The new tutor asks with a cold gaze if she was serious about sleeping. Confused and very annoyed, the noblewoman asks if the mercenary has gone completely crazy. He then grabs her by the arm and says they need to go somewhere important. The boy drags her down the hall as she yells for the servants to stop him. Under the bright moonlight, the young man takes the noblewoman out of the mansion by force. He drags her along a dirt path, away from the Duplain family residence. Arriving at a secluded spot, the tutor throws her forcefully onto the dirt ground. The girl yells angrily and asks who he thinks he is to dare to teach her. The young man asks if she wants to hear an interesting fact, and she gets confused. With a smile, he reveals that he's not going to teach her magic, and that he just enjoys roughing up nobles. Shocked by the revelation, the girl asks what he just said to her. He continues, saying that being a tutor is just an excuse for his wicked plans. Then the mercenary gets closer and says, it's an excuse to deal with nobles like her. With that, he draws his sword and says the screams of nobles are quite beautiful. The girl then asks, frightened, if he thinks he'll get away with this. With a smile, he says yes, because she's going to a monastery, and no one would believe her. The mercenary says that in the worst-case scenario, he can atone with his life, since a commoner's is worthless. He continues, saying he could just run away and would be doing the family a favor by getting rid of her. Completely terrified, the young noble thinks she's done for if she gets caught by that man. With that, the blonde-haired girl starts running desperately to escape the danger. She thinks she needs to lose him in the forest because he would easily catch her in the open field. The young woman knows the forest well and plans to get back home through it, but she ends up tripping. She then thinks that he's the one who's in trouble, but suddenly something catches her attention. A huge fireball appears in the sky, illuminating all the darkness of that night. The white-haired young man then launches the powerful spell in the direction of the forest. Startled, the girl turns around and realizes that it's a fireball spell. The magic tutor holds the sphere of fire with a serious and determined look. With a mischievous smile, the mercenary shows that he's not playing around. At this, the powerful fire magic flies quickly toward the frightened girl. The reflection of the flames shines in the noblewoman's eyes as the attack gets closer. With a scream of terror, the girl is thrown back by the impact of the explosion. A large fiery explosion happens right behind her, destroying everything around. Fallen on the ground and in a total panic, the young noble can barely believe what she saw. With a frightening smile, the mercenary says he missed his shot on purpose. The full moon lit up the night as the chase continued through the dark forest. Because of this, the young noblewoman ran desperately to try and save her own life. On her face, the girl showed a mix of fear and determination to escape, but in a moment of distraction, she ended up tripping over a tree root in her path. From the trip, the blonde girl fell hard onto the dirt ground, unable to protect herself. Fallen and exhausted, she could barely stand and only stared at what was coming toward her. Suddenly, a powerful blue energy arrow appeared and flew at high speed. With a focused look, the magic tutor prepared his next attack without any hesitation. Then, the energy arrow zoomed right past the noblewoman, who was lying on the ground. The young girl was in shock and couldn't react after seeing the magical attack pass so close to her. The mercenary then praised her movements and said it was hard to believe she stayed in the annex. Out of breath, the girl just stared at him in silence, completely confused. Then she stood up and started running back into the forest, while the young man watched her. With a slight smile, the white-haired tutor seemed to have everything under control. The noblewoman wondered how long she would keep running and if she would ever manage to escape that place. Suddenly, she seemed to have a big realization and stopped running for a moment. Meanwhile, the boy used his magic on a puddle of water along the path. He then observed the trail in the dark forest that the blonde girl was following. The young man confirmed that it was the forest he saw in the paintings, and where she used to play. He understood that she felt the energy of nature and transferred it into her paintings. With his red eyes glowing, he seemed to have understood exactly what was happening. Then, the girl got tired of running and threw a stone at the mercenary's head. But the white-haired young man just calmly drew his sword to defend himself. With a quick motion, he cut the stone in half with no trouble at all. The noblewoman was then in shock and totally frightened by the tutor's skill. He praised her attitude for trying to fight back and said it wasn't an easy decision to make. Exhausted, the girl fell to the ground gasping for air, with no strength left to keep fighting. With a cold look, the young man said it seemed she had no more energy to run. He then pointed his sword at the noblewoman and asked if she had any last words. But with a smile, the girl didn't seem to care much about his threat. She challenged him and said she wouldn't lower herself like commoners would in that situation. The mercenary then asked why she was so obsessed with her noble lineage. The blonde young woman just lowered her head in silence for a moment. She revealed that if they took away her noble status, there would be nothing left for her. Angrily, the girl began to shout desperately about magic and her failure. With tears in her eyes, she screamed that he didn't know how much she had tried and failed. The white-haired tutor just watched the young noblewoman's outburst in silence. She went on to say that she failed at magic, at painting, and at everything she tried to do. Desperate, she asked what else was left for her besides her noble lineage. The girl then fell to her knees and wondered what she was without her social status. The white-haired tutor just watched her in silence, processing her entire outburst. Then he summoned a blue energy sword and prepared for the next step of his plan. With tears in her eyes, the young noblewoman seemed to have accepted her tragic end. The mercenary then raised his blade and said he had heard everything she had to say. Terrified and with a red face, the girl said her goodbyes, waiting for the end. With a quick movement, the white-haired boy swung his energy sword. The noblewoman then closed her eyes tightly while waiting for the tutor's final blow. She kept her eyes closed, not knowing what was about to happen to her. Suddenly, the mercenary's blade created massive ice crystals all around her. The young girl opened her eyes and saw the ice crystals forming everywhere. Then, the boy created an ice barrier around that noblewoman without hurting her. The girl looked at her hands and wondered if that was some kind of magic. With his plan complete, the white-haired young man then put away his energy sword. He apologized for his rudeness and praised the girl's hard work. The young noblewoman remained in shock, not understanding what had just happened there. The tutor explained that it was just a manifestation of mana and that she did well. Because of this, the girl couldn't hold back her emotions and began to cry uncontrollably. She screamed and cried desperately, releasing all the frustrations she had been holding inside. The mercenary just watched from a distance, while the young woman let it all out. The full moon in the sky then illuminated the end of that intense nightly lesson. The tutor reveals that she belongs to a wild magic school, and the girl is confused by the information. While bandaging her leg, he explains that the learning process varies greatly between different orders of mages. He goes on to say that trying to learn the wrong theories is like forcing your body into clothes that don't fit at all. At that moment, the young noblewoman asks how he discovered she was part of such a rare magical lineage. The white-haired young man says he saw the paintings she made and noticed something very special in those strokes. With a serious look, the mercenary states that she felt the energy of nature and ended up transferring all of it to the canvas. He then explains that mages of this type feel natural mana since they were children, which is why she was always different from others. The blonde girl is in total shock as she realizes her hidden talent has finally been recognized by someone. As soon as he finishes the bandage, the young man says the job is done and now she can walk with less pain. But the master warns that she has only taken the first step and that the real training will begin tomorrow. Suddenly, the blue-eyed girl calls his name while watching him walk away down the dark path. Even though she is embarrassed, the young noblewoman thanks him for his help and shows that her view of the young man has changed. The protagonist just listens to her words in silence, without showing any exaggerated reaction at that moment. With that, the two begin to walk back to the mansion, while the starry night covers the entire forest. During the walk, he comments on the sunset painting and says it was a complete work of art. The next morning, sunlight enters through the bedroom window and lights up the entire luxurious room of the residence. Young, Yahello wakes up determined and sits on the bed, ready to test what she learned from her new master. Then the girl extends her hand and begins to focus a small amount of blue energy between her fingers. With an intense glow in her eyes, she tries to manifest her power naturally, just as she was instructed before. However, the magic ends up failing and turns only into smoke, leaving the little noblewoman quite irritated with the result. A maid carries a bucket of water while walking peacefully through the luxurious hallway of the mansion. At that moment, the young blonde girl suddenly opens the door and scares the distracted servant, who almost falls. Startled, the bucket slips from her hands and the water splashes everywhere on the hallway carpet. The dirty water hits the young noblewoman's dress directly, leaving her frozen in that unexpected situation. Desperate, the employee begins to apologize frantically for making such a serious mistake in front of her, but the girl just stares at the woman with a cold look, without expressing any kind of emotion or immediate anger. Then the servant kneels and begs for forgiveness, fearing she will be mistreated by the mistress, as she was in the past. Surprisingly, the girl just tells her to be more careful and continues on her way as if nothing had happened there. Because of this, the maid is in total shock and wonders why she didn't get a slap or a shout from the spoiled girl. As her other colleagues approach curiously, they try to understand what changed in the young mistress's strange behavior. In another room, the white-haired tutor sleeps peacefully, enjoying his rare moment of rest and great peace. Suddenly, violent knocking on the door wakes the young man, who complains about the infernal noise so early on his day off. He then opens the door while rubbing his eye and trying to understand the reason for all the shouting in his ear. At that instant, the blonde girl appears accompanied by the butler and demands that the magic lessons begin at this exact moment today. The gentleman with the monocle is shocked to discover that the young girl finally managed to manifest her mana alone in her room. With a determined look, the student orders the mercenary to teach her quickly because she is very anxious to progress soon. But the young man simply closes the door in their faces and tells them to come back only in the afternoon because he wants to sleep. At this, the butler begins to cry with joy seeing that his mistress has finally decided to take her studies seriously. Irritated by the dismissal, The girl begins to pound on the wood and screams for that person to open the door right now. Even with all the scandal outside, the white-haired young man goes back to bed and decides to ignore the little brat. The day dawns radiantly over the enormous mansion of the noble family, while the sun shines in the blue sky. Then we hear the sound of firm footsteps echoing through the luxurious corridors of that immense property. Two maids comment in surprise that Lady Diela hasn't broken a single plate all day. Because of this, rumors spread, and everyone finds out that the girl finally managed to use her mana. At that moment, someone approaches the servants as the sound of boots gets louder and louder. The dark-haired young man stops and asks what the two of them were saying about his sister just now. Meanwhile, the patriarch of the family continues, writing calmly on a parchment with his quill. In the office, the Lord receives his children to discuss the news about the little girl's magical progress. The Grand Duke states that it is excellent news and seems satisfied with his daughter's progress. But the young man with green eyes says it is still far too early to celebrate such a simple achievement. Irritated, the blonde brother yells at Raig for not being able to give a single compliment to his own sister. At that instant, the father observes his son's argument with a serious and very attentive look from behind his glasses. He remembers that the girl caused many problems in the past, and they shouldn't cancel her trip to the monastery. The leader of the house continues his task in silence, while weighing the future of that troubled child. Time passes and the sun remains strong, illuminating every corner of that vast medieval kingdom. Inside the room, the noblewoman appears, sitting with her back turned, and seems to be pouting very much about something. Then the white-haired mercenary enters the place and asks if the girl is pouting for some reason. At this, the blonde girl replies that she isn't just pouting, but is actually very angry about everything that is happening. The young man scratches his head and states that acting like a spoiled child won't help anything in that situation. But the little girl screams again, saying it's not a tantrum, and reaffirms that her feeling is one of pure hatred. With that, the white-haired young man says that throwing a tantrum is useless, and everything needs to happen in the correct order to work. But the blonde girl screams in anger and states that she isn't having a fit, but is showing that she is very irritated with him at this moment. The mercenary then stares at her with a serious and cold look while maintaining his calm posture in the face of the girl's revolt. He then says he's going to call it a tantrum anyway, and leaves the little noblewoman totally speechless with his mockery. At that moment, the red-eyed young man places his hand on the chair as he prepares to give an important lesson. With that, he explains from his own experience that using too much mana at once can cause total exhaustion in a mage's body. He goes on to say that resting is just as important as training, but the girl seems to find that talk very boring and tedious. Noticing her discouragement, the teacher asks if she prefers a much less boring method to learn things now. Then he remembers when he used flames and his sword to scare the young girl and show who really calls the shots there. Remembering that moment of pure terror, the noblewoman begins to break into a cold sweat and feels a chill run through her entire body. She quickly changes her attitude and says she doesn't need anything radical and prefers to continue with the normal method instead. With that, the master begins to explain that after mastering the flow of energy, learning 1 star spells will be very easy for her. He reveals that the wild school has no strict rules and focuses on freedom, being perfect for those who learn on their own. The young man states that this style fits her personality very well, and this leaves the blonde girl quite curious at the sudden compliment. At this, the tutor explains that her free spirit has a great synergy with this type of magic, and her noble blood helps a lot. The girl remains silent for a brief moment, while processing those kind words she had never heard from anyone before. With red cheeks, she wonders if she really possesses some special talent for the mystical arts at that moment. The young man confirms that creating an ice wall on the first try proves her potential, and she asks if she is a true genius. But he soon warns that there is a huge difference between having talent and being a real genius, and the conversation continues through the window. Meanwhile, Outside, the dark-haired brother watches everything while hidden and listens to the dialogue between the two in the room. At that moment, the dark-haired young man grumbles irritably as he realizes his sister is actually progressing and shows great dissatisfaction. The next day, the sun shines intensely over the enormous mansion, while the heavy training routine continues non-stop across the entire property. With that, the girl runs to the room and tells her master that she can manifest the power but cannot control the direction of the spell. Soon after, she interrupts him during his meal and complains that she tried to use the ice element, but the sensation was very strange and different from what was expected. On another day, the little noblewoman continues chasing the tutor through the corridors and screams that she feels the energy flowing, but in a totally wrong way. During sunset, the blonde girl finally finds the mercenary resting near a tree and asks what he is doing there alone. Irritated, the girl complains that he should be near the annex and asks if the young man thinks her father gave him the book just so he could be lazy. Very calmly, the white-haired young man replies that the Grand Duke lent him the material precisely so that he could study in peace. But the girl ignores the answer and states that she finally managed to make the mana flow work and asks him to check the result quickly. Meanwhile, the blonde brother named Valerian observes the view from his office window and seems to be thoughtful about the family's direction. At that moment, the doors open and the white-haired tutor enters the room, answering the urgent call of the future patriarch of the noble house. The nobleman greets the guest and asks him to sit down because the two of them need to have a very serious conversation about recent events. Sitting face to face, the blonde man asks how his sister's performance is and shows great concern for the little girl's behavior. Honestly, the protagonist states that she has progressed quite a bit, but it will still take some time until she can master basic spells. At this, the older brother reveals that their mother will soon return from a trip and warns that the atmosphere in the mansion will change drastically. He warns that the matriarch is a difficult person and that many nobles do not accept seeing a commoner occupying such an important position in the residence. With an attentive look, the mercenary says he will remember this important warning and asks if there is anything else the blonde man wants to say. The future patriarch remains silent for a brief moment while he seems to choose the right words to conclude his reasoning with the young man. He then stands up and explains that his mission as successor is to protect all family members and always be sincere with each of them. But the blonde man sighs and comments that understanding the human heart is a very complex task, and that reality is never as simple as it seems. The white-haired young man asks what the nobleman's point is with all that strange talk. At that moment, the blonde brother raises his fist and seems very emotional, remembering the family's past. He reveals with great sadness that little Diala no longer wants to play with him like she used to. The mercenary watches the man's drama with an expression of someone who doesn't understand anything that is happening. The blonde man continues his story, saying that his sister was like a perfect angel when the two were still children. While the nobleman makes his scene, the protagonist just drinks his tea calmly, not caring about his crying. Then the hare asks if there is a way for him to win back the little girl's affection somehow, but the tutor questions why he is being consulted about such a personal and weird matter. Suddenly, the girl's voice echoes through the mansion as she screams, desperately looking for her magic master. The man ignores the previous question and shows that he learned to make handmade dolls with one of the house servants. He displays a very creepy-looking toy and asks what the young man thinks of that strange work of art. Upon seeing the bizarre object, the protagonist asks if the nobleman is trying to cast a curse on someone now. Upset with the response, the blonde man begins to cry and becomes very sensitive to the mercenary's harsh criticism. With that, the scene changes to the outside of the luxurious residence, under a very clear blue sky that day. An elegant woman appears in the main hall and states that she has heard very good things about the white-haired young man. With a smirk, she comments that they managed to hire a very capable magic master for the noble family, The lady introduces herself as Mariella and says she intends to send a beautiful gift to the young man's homeland. At that moment, the young man reveals that he does not belong to any noble house or specific territory of any lord. The woman is in total shock and is startled to hear that the little girl's teacher is actually just a commoner. The sun shines brightly over the luxurious residence of the noble family, indicating it will be a long day full of surprises for everyone there. In the main hall, the young mercenary is surrounded by several maids and a very elegant lady who watches him closely. With a smirk, the woman comments that she has heard great things about the skills of the household's new magic tutor. She introduces herself as Mariella and says she plans to send a beautiful gift to the white-haired young man's homeland. But calmly, the red-eyed youth replies that he doesn't belong to any noble house or a specific lord's territory. The lady is in total shock and wonders if she heard correctly what the guest just said to her face. The protagonist maintains a serious expression and states clearly that he is just an ordinary commoner. At that moment, the woman's face twists into an expression of pure horror upon discovering the teacher's true origins. Going back 1 week in time, we see a luxurious carriage parked right in front of the noble family's massive mansion. With that, young Asura talks to the mercenary and says she made the right choice in bringing him to her territory, but she explains that she needs to return to Eberstein to handle urgent matters and will leave Delilah under the young man's care. The white-haired youth simply agrees to the order, showing he is ready to fulfill his mission without complaint. Then, the guild leader appears laughing and puts his hand on his subordinate's shoulder while making a joke about his response. He gets into the carriage with the noblewoman and tells the boy to finish the job quickly before someone shows up to cause trouble. The carriage then begins to pull away from the property, leaving the protagonist alone to deal with such a complicated family. But suddenly, the dark-haired girl puts her hand to her face as she realizes she forgot to tell him something very important. With a worried expression, she warns that her mother will return next week and that she forgot to give him a warning about her. The bearded man asks if the family's matriarch is someone who truly needs such a serious and urgent formal warning. At that moment, the scene focuses on the luxurious details of the mansion's ceiling as tension gradually begins to rise in the room. With that, the noblewoman describes her own mother as a true embodiment of terror that no one would want to cross paths with. Mariella gets furious and shouts, asking if a commoner is really her youngest daughter's instructor. The patriarch remains calm and asks his wife to lower her voice while he continues holding his quill. But the lady continues screaming in desperation, saying the little blonde girl is the most precious daughter of that entire noble lineage. At that moment, the Grand Duke takes off his glasses and confesses that he also doesn't like placing ordinary people in such important positions. The lady then recalls that all the other noble teachers gave up, but questions how they chose someone from the mercenary underworld. The Lord then explains that finding good tutors is difficult and reinforces that the white-haired young man was a direct recommendation from their daughter, Asura. With that, the woman begins pacing the office and says there must be at least a minimum standard of quality for that service. Then she suggests bringing in her own brother named Flam to teach the little girl now that she has finally managed to manifest her magic energy. The ruler asks if she wants to take a commander from the border to be a private tutor and if she thinks managing the duchy is a joke. But the matriarch shouts again, stating that Eberstein's high society is a true and very dangerous battlefield for young people. With that, she points her finger and says she doesn't want to see her daughter become a laughingstock at the grand debutante ball because of a nameless master. At that moment, the large office doors open, and someone enters to interrupt the heated argument between the noble couple. The blonde son, named Valerian, asks his mother to calm down, says she didn't come there just to fight with her husband. But the matriarch tells the boy to step aside and states that the matter is not something that can be easily ignored by anyone there. Then, the other brother, named Reg, questions if the real issue isn't whether that commoner has the talent to be Diala's instructor. He walks slowly while the two watch him closely, waiting for his next words regarding the white-haired mercenary. The dark-haired young man says that having a commoner as a tutor is strange, but if he has the necessary skills, it wouldn't be a big problem. With that, the young man asks his father to let him test the mercenary personally and suggests they face each other in a magic duel. But the patriarch tells his son not to bother and states with full certainty that the white-haired young man is indeed very powerful and capable. At that moment, the green-eyed brother falls silent and stares at his father with a serious expression upon hearing that unexpected praise for the commoner. At that moment, the dark-haired young man suggests they test his sister's skills instead of just focusing on the mercenary. With that, the blonde brother becomes confused and looks at his relative, not understanding the real goal of this unexpected new challenge. Then the young man explains that if the master is truly good at what he does, the little blonde girl should have made incredible progress in a short time. While the head of the house remains silent, he seems to seriously consider the proposal to see his youngest daughter's performances on the battlefield. Then, the green-eyed youth begins to leave the area while his older brother tries to call him back to continue the conversation in the office. But Valerian questions him about what he intends to do by proposing a magic duel against a child who is still so inexperienced. The young man in black asks if the blonde one really believes the little girl has changed her ways and forgotten all about her troubled past. At that moment, the heir states that she is still their only sister and that the family's blood bond should be protected. With an ironic smile, the younger brother scoffs at the term flesh and blood, showing that he no longer feels any affection for the girl. He shouts that the girl's behavior will destroy the noble lineage's name as soon as she is introduced to all of high society. Faced with these harsh words, the blonde brother becomes worried and wonders if his brother's hatred for the little girl has any real and dark foundation. At that moment, the young man states that she was the one who crossed the line first and that she should remain hidden from the whole world. In that annex, the future patriarch simply watches his relative leave while feeling the atmosphere inside the mansion grow increasingly tense. As soon as he leaves, the commotion in the office dies down, but the uncertainty about what will happen in the duel remains in the air for everyone. Meanwhile, a small bird rests on a tree branch outside, indicating that a new morning has begun at the luxurious residence. Suddenly, the little blonde girl bursts into her master's room screaming, showing she is very furious about something she just discovered. The white-haired young man continues reading his book calmly and wonders what the reason is for so much noise so early in his room. Then she throws an official scroll over the pages the young man was reading to get his magic tutor's full attention. With a determined look, the little girl states that if she loses this magic duel, the mercenary will be immediately fired from his position at the mansion. Despite the threat, the young man says he already heard that the opponent is an experienced one-star mage and that the fight will be difficult for her. The girl gets furious and shouts that the young man will be fired if he doesn't take that challenge seriously. At that, the mercenary calmly replies that he only does the work he was paid for and nothing more. He adds by saying that he has already received a great initial payment, so he doesn't care much about the rest. With that, the blonde girl is in total shock and asks if her instructor is being serious about this. 1 week passes, and the Grand Duchy's flag waves strongly, indicating that the day of the duel has finally arrived. The training courtyard is ready as the noble family and servants gather to watch the match. At that moment, the patriarch walks with authority, accompanied by his wife, who still seems quite irritated with everything. The white-haired young man bows respectfully and announces that the Lord and his entourage have just arrived. He maintains his calm and professional posture, even in the intimidating presence of all those powerful nobles. The father observes the young man and wonders if he is so confident for some secret reason. Sitting on his throne, the Lord thinks that someone with such courage should not be dismissed quickly. Firm footsteps echo through the area as the opponent approaches the battlefield with a deadly gaze. The dark-haired brother walks with his cape swaying, showing that he is ready for the confrontation. With a cold look, he states that this is no simple duel, and that he intends to crush his sister. Then, the young man climbs the steps and promises he will make the little girl bitterly regret her entire past. The little noblewoman takes her position on the battlefield as the atmosphere turns heavy between the two siblings. Wearing her red hood, the girl shows a focused expression and seems ready for the fight of her life. But she is startled by what she heard and asks if her master truly doesn't care about anything besides money. Then he explains that her mana has already stabilized and that soon she will be able to cast powerful spells. At that, the instructor states that she has noble blood running through her veins, leaving the young girl completely speechless. He reinforces the wild school focuses much more on self-study than on receiving constant lessons from someone else. Then the girl shouts in annoyance, wondering why the tutor is saying all those strange things at that exact moment. The young mercenary simply listens to the little girl's venting with a calm and very peaceful expression on his face. Looking down, the blonde girl admits she knows she isn't the best student, but she shows she is being sincere now. Then she cries and says she wants to continue learning from the white-haired young man because she won't accept any other teacher in his place. The master remains silent for a brief moment while observing the determination and deep sadness in his student's eyes. With that, the ride youth begins putting on his glove and mentions that he has never participated in a formal noble duel before, but he states he can teach her how to win a real fight and asks if the little noblewoman truly wants victory today. At that time, everyone said that young Diala had no talent for magic, and that even famous tutors gave up on her. People commented maliciously that the Duplain lineage had already passed its prime, and that the youngest only knew how to throw tantrums. Some said it would have been better if she had never been born, but the girl shows a fiery look and asks for help to win. At that moment, the little girl walks toward the battlefield with her red cape swaying under that morning's radiant sun. He watches closely and realizes she is not there as a sister or as the youngest daughter of an important family. The girl takes her position with an intense sparkle in her eyes, because now she sees herself only as his disciple and a true mage.